Welcome to the Black Moon Lilith video. I've been promising you guys, this is going to be chock full of information, but before we go anywhere, go down into the description box, hop on that link, and get your Black Moon Lilith placement natally according to your natal chart. All right, because you use the link below. There are plenty of links if you don't know where your Black Moon Lilith is placed in your chart. The link below will give you not only the sign that Black Moon Lilith is in, right, was in when you were born, but it'll also show you placements. So we want to know the house that it's in, and we want to know the placements. So go and do that right now, and then come back to the video. Okay, so hopefully you guys have your placement. Hopefully you guys have it right in front of you, because we're going to be referring to things. But what is this Black Moon Lilith? I'm not going to get into the mythology of it. What I'm actually going to do is put in the description box the basic story of the mythology of Black Moon Lilith. Very interesting, but I want to really get right into the information, because honestly there's a lot to cover, and I sort of weave it in other elements. So hang with me. Please don't jump forward to just see, now that you know your placement, to just see that. You need to understand how to understand your Black Moon Lilith in relation to everything else, okay? So first of all, wherever your Black Moon Lilith placement is, whatever house it's in, understand that it also works with the opposing house, right? So, you know, we always have that first house, seventh house, second house, eighth house, and I'm going to go through that as well and what all of that means. So we need to understand what your Black Moon Lilith placement means in whatever sign that you had it in when you were born, that you have it in natally to blueprint. And we also have to understand the house it's in and how it might work in tandem with the opposite house. So we're going to discuss that in a general way. For me to talk about every single specific placement, we'd be here for 5 hours. You know, maybe I'll do that as a webinar at some point over the summer, because my goal here over the summer is really, I want to teach you guys about Black Moon Lilith, about your nodal placements, about Chiron. I really want to get into teaching some basic numerology. And when I say basic, I mean that it's tangible. If everything is just, fugazi, it's not really going to be a direct application. So we don't want to deal with that. So again, if you see me looking down, I'm just looking at my notes because I don't want to miss anything. So we are going to be going through Black Moon Lilith in each of the signs and what it means for you. So I did mention that it's like, the nodal energies, in that, again, it's like a pocket of a placement, but it works, guys, more like Pluto, Neptune. You know how Pluto and Neptune are very under the surface, right? It's very like a psychic transformation. There's this depth about them. It kind of lurks underneath the surface. It's very much what Black Moon Lilith is. It's this thing that's sort of underneath, and we know it's a palatable energy. And it's very, very powerful. It really is. And those of you who've gotten private readings from me know I kind of go straight to understanding natal placements of that Black Moon Lilith and the nodal energies. And I just want to give a heads up. There is no shade being thrown. We all have a Black Moon Lilith placement, that we all have this dark spot that we have to work through. All of us have it. No, it's not good. It's not bad. It just kind of is. And what I find very interestingly is when I do Black Moon Lilith work with people, they're like, that's not me at all. No. Yeah. But then I frequently will get contacted a few months later and say, oh, you know what? As a matter of fact, because it is this thing we don't really like to look at. But it does have this resonance of, like, again, Pluto, Neptune, South Node energy. Those of you who know numerology, we're talking fourth pinnacle here, that major, the challenge number. You know how it's the three majors, the three minors and the one major, that major, that's often that challenge. So we're talking that, all right? It's very similar to that. But this sensitive point represents the darker side of your nature, characteristics that you know exist and you need to address, but you'd really rather not acknowledge. The sign of her placement, I'm going to call her, but obviously we all have male-female energies. Guys, you have Black Moon Lilith too. You know, it just, and for some reason, it's really delivered as very much of a female energy to females for the most part in this in this community. And I don't know why, because men have Black Moon Lilith placements too, equally to women. It's the same thing, right? Again, but anyway. So the sign of her placement and the condition of the ruling planet will determine the way in which she expresses herself in your birth chart, you know, when you're in your blueprint. The astrological house she occupies describes an area of your life in which you can become aware of this dark side and really examine it, examine yourself in that particular area, and really do it with openness and love. No judgment, just openness and love. You know, you want to figure out, what do you deny? What do you say is not true about yourself? What do you maybe project onto others in this particular placement? But the gift here is the opportunity to bring this out into the light of day, right? Put it out on the kitchen table and shine the brightest light on it so that it doesn't have to be an issue anymore. It's not that it goes away. It's just that once you call it out and you know it's there, it doesn't plague you from underneath. You can work with it. And it ends up being a really beautiful, powerful friend in your life if you can bring yourself to really embrace this element of yourself. Lilith represents the creative energy that unites sex with spirituality. It's the instinct of enjoyment and that dark force that exists inside of every creative process, guys. So how important is this to understand? Think about whenever you're being creative and whatever it is that you're doing. That fundamental driving force that you can't really put your finger on, that's her under it, and we all have it. It also represents the point, though, where we can become transgressors, where we can cross that line, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, because this placement can indicate how we can achieve, how we can handle life with more lucidity, you know, where we feel more connected, where we can feel personal affirmations, where we can feel really good about ourselves and the ability to enjoy. But if this is poorly aspected, or you know, you haven't really integrated it into your personality, maybe you haven't known that you had to, maybe you haven't really called it out into the light yet, this can definitely represent issues, absolutely, where you can end up very submissive in that area of life, or you can suffer some sort of repression without even realizing it, without really not knowing why. But this is the thing with this energy. The Black Moon cannot be approached solely with reason or logic. You can't sit down and say, well, you know, I know how things need to be done. So if I have, you know, my Black Moon Lilith and Aries in the 10th house, then I know how things need to be done, and people just don't understand me. I mean, it's just, it's as simple as that. I know my way is the right way, and I could sit here and reason all day long why my way isn't the right way, but I can't find a good reason. I am correct. You know, and it's that, it's, you want to be careful of not getting caught up in your own nexus, right? You can't sit down and rationalize it. It's not an A to B goes to C kind of thing, okay? It's related to instincts, and it's naturally very powerfully intuitive. So while you're doing this work, this is really all about working with the moon and all about working with the I feel. Rather than looking at facts to try to validate why certain things went a certain way, you need to really tap into the inner energy inside of you and ask yourself, why did I allow myself to be in that situation in the first place? Yeah, they did A, B, and C, but you know, what was going on in my life that I allowed these things to happen? Or, wow, I was born into that mess. You know, and I'm realizing now why things went a certain way in my life. It's not my fault, but I just have to understand that this is the way the energy is. And now that I know it, I could work differently with it. It's that kind of thing. Now, this interpretation in the birth chart doesn't seem to have the same importance as like the moon or the sun or the planets, you know. However, it's worth paying attention to because it does reveal a very profound dimension of who you are. But what exactly is Lilith in astrology? Well, in astrology, Lilith is not asteroid 1181 that bears the same name that was discovered on February 11th in the early 1900s. I think it was 1927. For astrologers, Lilith is the point of the moon furthest from the earth. Guys, this is a real point that I'm talking about. Right? It's known as the lunar apogee. So it's the furthest, right, on like the tip of the moon opposite us. So it's just important to understand the basics as far as I'm going to get a little more into the science and the mythology. The mythology, I said, I'm going to put in the description. So the distance from the moon to the earth varies constantly. We all know this. And it's this elliptical revolution around the earth. The moon has a point closest to the earth and another point farthest from the earth. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Now, you guys like when I give you numbers and dates to refer back to, that I know, because whenever I do that, I get so many of you saying that you appreciate it. So I'm gonna talk cycles here for a minute, okay? So I'm gonna want you to think back to some years, and let's talk some time limits here. So this makes a complete revolution around the zodiac in about 3,232 days. 3232. 3 plus 2 is 5. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 and 5 is 10. That factors down to a 1. Those of you who are into numerology. So it's like a reset, and that happens every 8 years and just about 10 months. That's how exact this is, guys. Seriously. So I'm going to give you age ranges that I want you to think back to, because if you think back after we go through your placement, I want you to apply what you're learning and think back. You know, you might have to take a few minutes to these years and think about any of the changes that happen during this time. So between your 8th and 9th year, okay, that's going to be really profound for some of you, depending on what your placement is. Now, depending on what happened, right? We all had changes happening here, but this is for all of us. We all went through changes in our it's almost like solar return, Black Moon Lilith return, okay? Where it was returning to the point of where it was when you were born, between the ages of 8 and 9. And I'm going to say around 2 months shy of that 9th birthday, okay? So the latter number always go like 2 months right before that birthday. So between the ages of 8 and 9, between the ages of 17 and 18, between the ages of 25 and 26, between the ages of 33 and 34, between the ages of 42 and 44, between the ages of 49 and 50, between the ages of 58 and 59, and so forth. Keep going 8 years and 10 months, and you're going to keep going. And that's where you're going to realize that, and I tell you, when I go back over those, now I don't remember so much 8 into 9, not too much. I mean, I had, I come from a very dysfunctional home, not to overshare. So whatever. I mean, 8 into my 9th year was probably my father doing something ridiculous, probably. But I remember 17 to 18, 25 to 20. I mean, these are I remember very profound shifts when I consider I have my Black Moon Lilith in Aries in the 10th house with Saturn. Hello, thank you very much. So we're going to talk about what all these things mean for you guys. All right, so now also, as we're talking, you're going to be checking what house you have Black Moon Lilith in. Now, a lot of you who've been watching me know I talk about the houses a whole hell of a lot. So some of you might be familiar, not, whatever, but I want you to think about the dynamic of the partners. Libra is, okay, let's start with Aries, because Aries start with Aries. Aries is the 1st house. Libra is the 7th house. They're partners, right? Okay. So it's like they complete each other. Aries, that 1st house of self, of belief system, of the way of approaching life. It's that 1st house energy that's usually hanging out with our ascendant. It's our drive, right? That's our 1st house. 7th house has to do with very deep partnerships, marital relations, business partnerships, soul connecting type of partnerships. So those two things work in tandem there, okay? So if you have Black Moon Lilith in Aries, it's naturally going to be associated with the first house, plus whatever house it was you were born with it in. You follow? I'm giving you myself as an example. So, you know, I have my Black Moon Lilith natally I have it in Aries. It's in my 10th house. It's in my midheaven. However, because Aries is the natural rule of the first house, I have to look at that dynamic as well. You follow? So I have to, when I think back, I'm going to think back to my 10th house, my midheaven career, but I'm also going to think back to how was I feeling about myself and the relationships in my life, and how did it impact my house of career? Do you follow? All right. So the first house and 8th and 7th house work together. Aries and Libra. First house self, 7th house relationship. Taurus, 2nd house, money. Finances, how you handle money, how you handle things that you value. Okay, that's Taurus, 2nd house. Scorpio, 8th house, other people's money. Very deep intimacy. That I'm talking about the soul connection element of intimacy. Not the act of sex, but that soul connection. It has to do with inheritance. It has to do with any sort of payout, your partner's money. Okay, then we have Gemini, the 3rd house of communication, is partners with Sagittarius, which is about the 9th house of our belief system. All right, higher education as well. Well, higher education is the 9th and the 12th house, to me equally so. Then we have Cancer, which is the 4th house of home, works with Capricorn, the 10th house of work, right? So I have to think about this, right? For me, because I have my Black Moon Lilith in my 10th house. Capricorn is the natural ruler of the 10th house, so I have to think about that, right? Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so I have Saturn hanging out in there. So I have to look at this dynamic, right? Myself and relationships, my home, and my career. I have to look at these things. Those are pretty pivotal, you know? And then we have to look at Leo, which is that 5th house of fun, has to do with hobbies, has to do with the love affairs, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, the actual act of sex, a relationship with children, right? That's partners with Aquarius, which is 11th house of friends, connections, people you associate yourself with. And then finally, we have Virgos, that 6th house that rules your everyday work environment as well as health. And Pisces is that 12th house energy. It's where escapism hangs out, our dreams, our fantasies, very deep intuition. You know, we call it the house of self-undoing. It's, you know, where a lot of our obsessions can hang out there as well. All right, so again, even though Lilith is not a planet with a physical body, it could still really have a profound act on us. So now let's get into talking about what it means in each side. So we're going to be starting out with mine first, okay? And again, no one can escape this, okay? So what does it mean if you have your Black Moon Lilith in Aries? Okay, so again, guys, whatever I'm saying, go back to, and if you have to jot it down, what the houses mean, and that's where you're going to have some lessons to learn in that house. So Lilith in Aries gives an absolutionist character that pushes you to jump into action even beyond your own desires. This gives passionate tendencies, great sensitivity, great sensuality. You have an indomitable personality, just like a very big personality. You'll be able to fight for causes that you consider fair. You value individualism, yes. You firmly defend your points of view. Lilith in Aries is the moon that lights the sky in like on the darkest nights of the soul. And that is the best way to really look at it. You know, you are bewitched by the most basic instincts. Your sensuality is overflowing. You're very, very direct in love. You can actually throw yourself on an object of your affection, even with violence. Like when you really love something, you love it so hard that it can cause like some kind of rejection. So you do want to be careful of that. In negative people, the dark side of their sexuality can become cruel and brutal. In this case, they will struggle in marriage. You guys will struggle in marriage if you really let your dark side come out to play, you know? Yeah, you could struggle in marriage due to being repeatedly unfaithful in some way. And it doesn't even have to be fully acting it out, but like through emotional affairs as well. People with this placement know about sexuality from a very young age. Okay, they really do. Now, something I want to say is a lot of these things can happen because of external forces and external situations. Like, you know, I could tell you, like, I probably knew about sexuality before I probably should have, because I had a stalker at an unusually young age where we had to get the authorities involved, and it was very scary and very emotional, and I was very young, and this person was in his 40s. I mean, it was just bizarre. And I had things like that happen very early. Very inappropriate things happened to me not knowing, right? But it was like the school of hard knocks. I had to get schooled right quick, you know, as they say in the South. But you know, let's just go on here. Lilith in Aries has there's a challenge here, before you figure this stuff out, that asserting yourself and making very executive, self-centered decisions, you might feel like it's selfish or wrong, that you feel some sort of shame for displaying anything that you consider to be sort of self-centered traits, for taking the lead without asking, or for making what you think like self-centered choices. Like, and that's what's very interesting, because Aries is usually like, hey, let's go, you know, and all of that. But there's that other side that's actually, because remember, it's Aries, but it's like Aries like with a broken leg, if you want to think about it like that. You know, and also people with this placement can feel very wary of people expressing very strong Aries traits, because they're shocked at how they can do so without apology. I tell you, that was a lesson I really had to work on. There could be some fear of taking the lead, asserting oneself, making executive decisions, but a simultaneous desire to do so, which can lead to extreme behaviors in these areas. Yeah. You know, learning to accept these traits in yourself is key, right? And this, again, so this could also apply to like the first house energy. So wherever your placement is, plus that first house energy. So here, for your Black Moon in Aries to work really well, you have to be true to yourself, straight up. Because it's really natural rule of the first house of self. Examine what circumstances make you jump or provoke you, and why. I mean, guys, you know, because Aries is that leadership energy, right? So, I mean, I learned about my Black Moon Lilith energy years ago and became hell-bent on being best friends with her. You know, and maybe it took it to an extreme, right? Because the Aries is a leader, in that I got my PhD in leadership. You know, maybe I took it to the other side, but I have to tell you that it was the hugest piece of self-growth for me. Honestly, probably learning about that and my nodal energies and my Chiron placement were probably the most profound things that incited self-growth for me. It's cool to know about yourself and your placements and all that stuff, but it's best to know where the fractures are in your foundation, right? So that you could just move it on, right? Fix stuff and move on. So now let's go on to Black Moon Lilith and Taurus. So the trial for Lilith and Taurus has to do with sensuality and money. Lilith and Taurus can give a great eagerness to have or accumulate whatever you see, right? Because it's Taurus, it's all about the senses. On the other hand, it can also make you decide to give up on all possessions. I don't need anything. You know, I'm not that kind of person, right? You almost talk yourself out of stuff. In some cases, it indicates a very stubborn person if it influences in an extreme way. And when in conjunction with the sun or the moon, it can give greed or poverty, these extremes, right, having to do. So when Black Moon Lilith casts its dark shadow on the horns of very sensual Taurus, it makes for a very lustful, bold kind of activity. Sex is very necessary in your life if you have this. But forget about wine and roses. If your natal chart doesn't have anything to contradict this, Lilith and Taurus adds to your sexual style an excessive side, while not adding the kind side of Taurus. Again, not throwing shade, guys. We just all need to be honest, right? Your excessive sexual side may only be known to those who you're really, really intimate with. Obviously, you're not going to share this with everybody, right? I mean, you know, but those close relationships are where it's going to be the most profound for you, where you're going to notice it's been an issue. The lowest instincts can appear in both men and women and lead them to pursuit, like the pursuit of pleasure for pleasure itself. You know, just anything that's going to feed your senses and make you feel good. Now, there may also be a total denial of sex on the other end of the spectrum, because remember, we're talking in extremes here, and thus an incurable impotence or sexual frigidity that can end up leading to loneliness. You may think, you know, sex is the only object of love, you know, where it's hard for you to make a distinction between the two. Your partner can perceive this as a lack of love, and it can destabilize your relationships. Sex can be denied to you, then you will seek peace by, you know, sexual misconduct, revenge, and extreme release with the intention of escaping from sexual denial, right? Now, Lilith in Taurus has felt shame for self-indulgence, not sharing, holding on to possessions too tightly, and for enjoying themselves without apology, right? So it's kind of like the wild child, or almost like the hermit energy. They feel guilty or wrong for doing these things, which can lead to all sorts of behaviors, whether it's like hoarding or purging or in between these extremes, right? But feeling ashamed for indulging oneself or getting comfortable. So you can have a hard time feeling really satisfied here, but you can fear that state of wanting at the same time. So, you know, perhaps you were punished in some manner at some point in your life for being slow, for savoring things or enjoying and indulging yourself, right? This can also apply to those second house energies, right, of resources. And that's because Taurus is that second house. So the advice here is to think about this. To what extent does your monetary situation liberate you or enslave you in your life? Think about what kind of belongings you want to have. What things in this world do you consider to be yours and only yours? Treat money and possessions according to your scale of values. Really important. And remember that people are not possessions, and sex does not equal love, right? Okay, so that was for my Taurus friends, Black Moon Lilith, Taurus. Black Moon Lilith in Gemini. If you have Lilith in Gemini, some of your most important personal trials will be in your way of communicating, right? Because Gem is all about the third house of communication. So your methods of communication may be the definitive test for a full manifestation of your qualities. You must take full advantage of your intelligence and your sensitivity, because otherwise you can fall into this situation where you provoke things, right? But now remember, right? I mean, the third house, we need to think about, like, you know, what does that third house work with? It's that ninth house, right? So you really want to think about that, your belief systems, right? And how you handle those things. As Mercury is the planet of eloquence, whoever has Lilith in Gemini will seek to captivate their prey. And I know that sounds very harsh, but you prey through means of words. Instead of innocently picking up a date, right? You might try to seduce a partner to satisfy your personal pride. Men especially are prone to acting like Don Juan with this placement. You know, they could partner up just to prance around with their trophy, you know, but once they achieve their prize, they go in search of more and more. And guys, this is such a deep energy that we don't like to think about these things. We don't like to, we're saying, I'm totally not like that. Absolutely not. Well, don't protest too much, right? I mean, if you are so like, I'm absolutely never like that, you need to think about that, because we're all everything at one point or another, at least in our mind at some point, right? If we're really honest. I know a lot of you are going to come after me for saying that, but that is the reality of psychology. Those of you who study psychology, you understand that truth. Okay. So, you know, sex can become your only objective here, using your mental sharpness to reach that desired end. Then, okay, you can be a prime example of where there's a lack of ethics. You know, you can, you know, people with this placement will promise what they know they will not fulfill. In women, this feature is toned down because they're more calculating. You know, they look for alliances with material ends. It's not easy to conquer a woman with the Black Moon Lilith in Gemini. And if she were to have a lover, nobody would ever know. Both men and women can be superficial in love with this placement. They care more about appearances than anything else. But if someone with Lilith and Gemini really falls in love, they can lose their mind. Like really lose yourself in it, you know. Now, you know, and I like to, you know, like in a nutshell, why is this, right? Lilith in Gemini has felt shame for speaking too much or too little, or for their intelligence or social skills, either in this life or a past life. You guys may be wary of people who seem to be indulgent in these ways, who are social butterflies, or who talk too much, or who seem to flaunt their intelligence. This is what's interesting about the Black Moon Lilith. It's like we have these things in ourselves, right? But these are things that we don't like in other people, because it like actually reflects our wounds, as I say in a lot of my readings, right? So your curiosity may have to be stifled in some manner, and you could fear not being considered smart. You could be wicked with what you say when you're angry, and shame in these areas can lead to extremes of behavior and a feeling of feeling out of control. So working on self-acceptance is the key to empowerment, okay? So again, wherever your Black Moon Lilith is in your natal chart, it's there, but it also has the energy of the third house, okay? So the advice here is try to be yourself in the way you communicate. Decide if you want to use your communication abilities to support your personal relationships, or to just show off some sort of, you know, unnecessary attempt at seeming intelligent beyond what you are. You know, you want to just make sure, because that comes off as immature anyway. And that could end up being an issue in whatever area it is, you know, whether it's 10th house of career, 5th or 7th house in relationships, you know, mature having to do with money. That would be a 2nd house kind of thing. Okay, so that is if we have Black Moon Lilith and Gemini. Black Moon Lilith in Cancer. If you have Lilith in Cancer, family will be the test to overcome. Sooner or later, you will need to make your own definition of home and family, you know, what that means for you in your life. One of your biggest challenges will be to examine your past family ties. You're highly interested in linking yourself to a team, a group, or even a community. And in some cases, Lilith in Cancer involves delays in having children of your own, which is very interesting. In addition to revealing sexual impulses, the Black Moon can also reveal inhibitions, right? So this is the kind of, remember, Cancer is that 4th house of home and us feeling safe. So this is the case with Black Moon Lilith in Cancer. Your sexuality is mostly manifested in daydreams. In a love relationship, you may be like really jealous, like to an exaggerated point. You may prioritize having a sense of ownership over your partner rather than the spirituality of the union. Whatever your sun sign, whoever has Lilith in Cancer may suffer when it comes to sexual relationships. For example, you may end up having to marry someone just for giving them pleasure, you know, like a person with this placement. You might end up marrying somebody just because they made you feel good, or just because you identify them as somebody who can bring you something that you think is going to be enjoyable in your life, you know, rather than just for the love, because there is a safety element in there, right? You know, just and recall that in antiquity, if a woman gave her body, marriage was mandatory, kind of thing. So it's interesting because on some level, like with the Black Moon in Cancer, it's like feeling you owe somebody something if they do something really beautiful or positive in a way that benefits you, where it makes you feel good or if it makes you feel safe. You have this subconscious feeling of being beholden to them in some way. And Cancers do that. I mean, Cancers do, you know, the Cancer energy does feel beholden anyway. That's why Cancers are usually the last ones to let go, right? In a situation, it's not easy for Cancers to let go of things. In private, though, the Cancer shyness disappears and the opposite effect can take place. You lose any moderation and inhibitions and you become very daring. It's like all of a sudden you're very, very daring. In some cases, you prefer to watch because you don't dare to personally try something. So you might like to watch a striptease, right? If you go to a strip club, you'll watch, but maybe you don't feel so comfortable doing it for your partner in private. You feel it guards your integrity if you look, but you don't touch. Passion surrounds you to the point that it almost suffocates you, sometimes leading you to solitude in the middle of the best marriages and the best relationships. Sometimes sexuality does not correspond to reality. So it's like where you're thinking things, that things should be a certain way in your mind, but then they don't play out in reality. And it's very easy for this placement to feel very, very disappointed. And when any Cancer placement is disappointment, there's a sense of retraction. And the reason here is chances are that you have felt ashamed for being needy or dependent, or for whatever reason, and you may feel awkward or even angry with people who display these traits without apology. Okay, your nurturing nature was stifled in some way, right? And you could feel very uncomfortable asking for help or expressing your need to be comforted or to seem in any way, shape, or form like needy, right? And this discomfort can lead to extremes of behavior and then misgivings afterwards, and then the cycle continues, right? So like, let's say if you have this in your 5th house, this is going to have to do with love affairs. That's an easy application there. It could also have to do with how you connect with your children and things that you really like. So the advice here is ask yourself what to do in order to free yourself from the burdens of your past and from your childhood. What are you still carrying with you that you might not even realize? Think about what kind of family relationships would motivate you to the fullest. Not necessarily, think about where you've been, but don't hold too fast to that. Think about more, focus on what you would like to create for yourself, and create that. And that heals this energy, really does. Okay, and then we have Black Moon Lilith in Leo. With Lilith in Leo, you must learn where your creative abilities and your core essentials reside. Remember, Leo's all about that 5th house energy. So that's in addition to wherever it was in your natal chart, it's there, but there's also the strong echoing of that 5th house energy, because Leo does rule that 5th house and is ruled by the sun. So if you don't discover your true self, you may feel driven to seek attention or social recognition, or to act out in an exaggerated way in order to make yourself notice. The personality you express must be authentically yours and not forced in any way, especially for this placement. I mean, that goes for everybody, but especially if your Black Moon Lilith is here. So if you have this placement in Leo, your love is centered on yourself. Psychologists call it narcissism. Both men and women seek to be honored for their beauty and their physical appearance with this placement. Again, guys, no shade, no shade. We all have stuff, okay? And you're like, damn it, no way, I'm not. Well, again, if you are saying no too much, you need to look at that. You can cause disappointments by taking advantage of your partner and by not recognizing your sexual emotional mistakes. You want to be really straight with yourself about how you are, how you carry things out in relationship. There is a tendency to lie with this placement. If you become unfaithful, you will, out of pride, play the misunderstood victim when you know inwardly that you betrayed your partner. And the repressed sexual impulses focus on I want. You may have unspoken internal conflicts. These can overflow and cause you to exercise power and dominion over your partner or children just because. Or as Aesop said from Aesop Fable, because I am the lion, that's why, that kind of thing. So why do you have this? What goes on energetically? Well, chances are you have felt ashamed or otherwise wrong for calling special attention to yourself, or seeking the spotlight, or for seeking to be better than others in any kind of competitive way. Now, that could have been from an earlier part of this life, or you could have brought this energy into a past life. And what I say by that is because we bring this energy into this life with us, but then and it's there already, but then depending on what we're exposed to in our life, in this inception, it's going to either inhibit it, or it's going to make it even more of an issue. You may feel uncomfortable with people expressing these kind of traits around you, any sort of egotism. The shame or discomfort can lead to extremes of behavior in these areas, which can exacerbate the problem, and then it ends up being the cycle. So you need to find ways to accept the very natural need for applause. Self-acceptance is the key to moderation and empowerment. Like, if you like to get attention, so what? There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. You know, nothing. I mean, that's that Leo energy. But there's a difference between a healthy ego and then unhealthy egotism. So really, the advice here is look for your own identity without falling into the world of appearances. Focus your fire on what passions you really, what passions you really have, what really gets you going, right? And don't look so much for recognition from others, I mean, know that it's nice and everything, but don't do things specifically for that reason, because that'll backfire on you with that particular placement. Okay, so let's go on to Black Moon Lilith in Virgo. All right, so again, you want to look in your natal chart, where is it placed? And you're also going to have the echoing of that 6th house energy, Virgo, right? And yeah, so just, everything that I indicated at the earlier part of the video as well. So Lilith in Virgo affects your daily activities. You will be one-sided and likely fall to the extreme, either obsessive, compulsive, and perfectionist, or very messy, one or the other. Lilith in Virgo can also give you a lucid expression of sexuality, or on the contrary, repression of instincts. So you should develop your own ideas regarding health and your own sense of discretion, having to do with things that are otherwise considered discreet, right? Like in your everyday, everyday things are, how you take care of yourself, any sexual activity, anything that you would do in your day-to-day, right? Even your day-to-day work environment, anything there, like naturally, right? Because that is that 6th house, in addition to whatever house that you have it in. So you may boast about knowledge that you don't have with this placement. Again, no shade, we all have stuff, right? You may put material security above your desires. You choose a partner who does not bring problems or more, you choose a partner who does not bring problems. You don't want to deal with that, right? You want one that sort of likes to help you resolve your problems. You don't want to have to deal with other people's problems so much. Everything would indicate that you go in search for security here. It's all about security. So you expect too much. You seek ideal love rather than realistic love. Again, I know a lot of you are going to be like, hell no. Just sit with these ideas and these energies and think about the time periods that I mentioned when we have, Lilith changing, coming back for that return. Just think about the overall impact these ideas have had on your life. In terms of sexuality, you're able to achieve what you set out for and even hide your infidelities. You're quite dangerous since you can lose your head very easily, sexually speaking. In the worst extreme case, your inhibitions will prevent you from developing your sexual life normally, and whatever normal means, but and you'll know that. Rather than endure sexual dissatisfaction, you would rather just stay alone. Not even deal. These inhibitions will affect your health. In the best case, you could transform yourself into a meditative, sort of isolated individual, but always regretting not finding your other half. So it's like you're making this conscious decision to sort of extricate yourself from society, but you always have this longing. And you feel like a victim for finding yourself in inferior conditions. In those cases, you should know that it's up to you to decide what your body does and that you have the right to choose. Your frustrations will be visible and difficult to solve, not because they're too big of a problem, but because there are many simple little limitations that you impose on yourself. It's like a lot of little things. So chances are you have felt ashamed, off, like a little off compared to everyone else, or wrong about paying special attention to the practical side of life. Attention to details, organizations, and routines. So, you may go through great pains to prove that you're not ordinary, that you're not worried, right? That you're not eager to please or concerned about details enough to perfect a certain project or craft. So, and this can end up leaving many things, many projects unfinished that can be seen, that can be a sign of perfectionist expectations. This way, you don't have to deal with, like, if you don't finish it, you don't have to deal with it not being perfect, kind of thing. You know, extremes of this behavior and binging and purging in these areas can be a sign of imbalance. So working on self-acceptance is the key to empowerment here. This can also apply to Lilith in the 6th house again, right? But you really need to reflect. The advice here is reflect on why you're not integrating more into your professional field. Is it that you're afraid of failure? Do you want to be a perfectionist at work? You know, really where you're very focused on perfectionism. You know, and be careful of that. Okay, so now let's go on to Black Moon Lilith in Libra. Okay, your main test will be in the area of personal relationships, ethics, and how you use your degree of magnetism or attraction. If your Black Moon works well, everything is going to go great in these manners. However, you can also be too uncompromising or too much of a perfectionist, especially with your partner and with social relationships. Because remember, Libra is that 7th house of like marital level partnerships as well as business partnerships. Yeah, you know, or you might think that society or your partner or your business partner even, that they demand too much from you. If you have your Black Moon here, sex is your leading interest, not just sex, but physical beauty. Right, because Libra's ruled by Venus, or giving great importance to the external aspect. Joy is expressed with sexual energy. It takes only some little something smelling good and a little alcohol to stimulate you and put you in the mood for physical relations. But if Lilith has bad aspects by birth or transit, you could become aggressive and you dramatize the sexual relationship. So in this position, Lilith is not so dangerous, although she's ruthless, right? Where you hide your vulnerability with cynicism or within cynicism. You become very cynical about relationships. You become very cynical about those close bonds. And this is probably because you have felt ashamed or wrong for needing companionship or seeking approval of others at some point, probably in a past life, right? Because we do bring this energy in with us. You may otherwise feel that dependency and compromise are weak and not right, and can feel uncomfortable with people who seem to need these things. Again, this is really about not liking in others what we know we possess, but we don't want to look at, that kind of thing. In the absence of self-acceptance regarding these very real needs, extremes of behavior in these areas can be the result, and it ends up perpetuating the cycle. So really working on self-acceptance within relationships is the key here to empowerment, right? So the advice here is think about what you really expect from others and to what extent do you want to get involved in your relationships. You know, all of your I'm talking close relationships. How much do you even want to get involved? Learn to enjoy your one-to-one relationships with serenity and peace. And if somebody is not respecting you, or, you know, if you're not feeling comfortable in those close connections, you really need to eliminate those people from your life, because for you, especially, part of really embracing this energy is to understand what it means to have serenity and peace in close relationships. Look for inner beauty and harmony, right? Not only external. Okay? Now on to Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio. You must overcome tests concerning passion, sexuality, and the ability to penetrate hidden mysteries. You can exert a great transforming power over others in a positive or a negative sense. I've seen this happen, so this is a very powerful energy, this placement. According to the rest of your birth chart, okay? It can be positive or negative depending on what else you have going on in your birth chart. But you need very intense experiences with this placement. Nothing wrong with that, because we can have intensity in very positive ways as well, too. So the Scorpio fascination for sex dates back to your youth, okay? Think about when you were younger, when your intense curiosity was mainly aimed at unveiling all of the mysteries and taboos that were imposed by your family or some sort of religious institution or whatever society you were involved in private, you could take it to the extreme, right? Either to one side or the other of sexual limits. For example, towards the inhibition of all eroticism or towards the most unbridled sexuality, right? I mean, a lot of people with this placement, they're really closed off from, anything, any sort of eroticism, right? Or they're on the other end of the spectrum. There's a danger of being an exhibitionist and, very heavy voyeurism in both men and women here. Those who have a very complicated and inharmonious birth chart are the most sadistic individuals in this area. And again, I'm not throwing shade. It just is it is what it is. And this might be something that you might be harboring in a very, quiet, personal part of yourself that you really don't talk about. And it's okay. You have to just see where else this placement is. You should always pay attention to where it is with the current transits as well, because that's where obsession is going to be hanging out, right? Because where there's Scorpio, there is obsession, right? Lilith and Scorpio probably here, right? We always look at the what could have happened to make this be your placement. Chances are you felt ashamed, because there's always shame underneath this, for the natural need for intimacy and attachment and really deep contact. This could be from a past life. Where you may have felt wrong if you were expressing jealousy or possessiveness or attachment, and you could feel uncomfortable around those who are particularly possessive or need that attachment. Again, it's about recognizing in others what we actually don't like in ourselves and it really bothering us. And a lot of times it's that kind of thing where you meet somebody and they have this quality and it's just they're hitting you the wrong way and you can't quite pin what it is that you don't like about them. And a lot of times it's actually this thing that you don't even know to look at within yourself. So it's very interesting the way it works here. A lack of acceptance in these areas, though, can lead to extreme behaviors that end up exacerbating the problem. So empowering yourself involves working on accepting these qualities, really understanding that 8th house energy as well, as far as other people's resources and deep, profound, that soul connection part of sex. But the advice here would be beneficial for you to know what attracts you to the mysterious things or people in your life. Avoid acting out in an extremist way. Really be mindful. Consider that in addition to all the darkness in the world, there is also beauty and harmony, that it doesn't have to just be those shadow sides having to do with those elements, okay, that I mentioned. Okay, on to Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius. Your test may be abroad in a foreign land, right? Because Sag is all about foreign travel. So you should learn how to combine your wildest or most adventurous side with your more accommodating and conservative side. Because you guys do have that as well. Well, Sagittarius does, because Sagittarius rules our belief system as well. So if your Black Moon works well, you're going to be very attracted to the development of your intellect and spirituality. Otherwise, you could fall into superstition or become a player within the love game. And just the shadow side of that is like a really good manipulator. Black Moon Lilith in Sag mixes money with love. Okay, there is just this mixing. Anyone who has Lilith in Sag can invest money to get emotional benefits. Paying for love in this way could lead to ruin. You got to be careful here. People with Lilith and Sag are usually involved in legal proceedings or being slandered for sexual reasons or enduring revenge for infidelities. Like if you cheat, you end up with this energy who's just really wants to come after you and punish you. Maybe you may practice adultery because you're not exactly contained sexually. Your love for novelty can induce you to infidelity in the most blatant ways, with this a false sense that you're innocent, where you actually feel like you're not to blame. You really don't feel like you're to blame. And you could live with your two lovers under one roof, maintain two homes at the same time, and even set up group relationships are indicated here. You can also find yourself in ambitious situations, such as falling in love with your best friend's spouse. Right? For you, all is fair in love and war. Oh my gosh, if I could tell you how many situations I've had in my life with people similar, with people with that placement. Very interesting. But why has this happened to you, or why? It happens to all of us. It's this energy that we take in. That's not what I meant to say. But why do you feel like this way, right? These are energies that we bring into this life with us. And it's always based in some kind of shame. So chances are you felt ashamed for your curiosity, your questions, your restlessness, the need to challenge and question life, facts, beliefs. You know, and any sort of curiosity, or you need to get away and expand and seek meaning, right? All these things are beautiful Sagittarius energies. But you were maybe like held down or put down because of these things. So you may feel uncomfortable around people who express these traits, right? Because it really is about recognizing in someone else that which we are being denied within ourselves, right? Because you have this natural predisposition to embrace these qualities, but yet they're being repressed because of this placement. So you can end up, when you're feeling stressed out, you can end up going to extremes in these areas, everything that I mentioned. So working on self-acceptance is really, really important here, right? You want to think ninth house energies, belief system, it's kind of big, right? So think about what adventures you need to live out in order for you to experience fullness, or break out of your current boundaries that you might feel right now in your life. Avoid falling into major social non-conformity kind of situations, because those are not going to really work for you. Okay, on to our Capricorn, Black Moon Lilith in Capricorn. So your test is related to your sense of responsibility and foresight. You may experience delays in finding or developing your career, right? Because Capricorn is naturally that 10th house placement ruled by Saturn. So you may experience delays in finding or developing your career, or at least one that you like, that you feel really at home in. If your Black Moon works well, you're going to have a sense of discipline and duty, right? Because that is the higher vibration of Capricorn. So you'll achieve prestige, which is great. However, you can also be too cold or demanding of others, like at the same time, and that could work against you. So this placement symbolizes the inhibition of some form without necessarily having to do with sex. It doesn't have to do with sex. So in Capricorn, it leads to solitude and introversion and deepens the inner life even more. So you could be somebody who actually spends a lot of time alone, and it's like you don't really like to be alone, but you're totally fine being alone. You're totally fine. As for sexuality, we find it diminished here to the point of sublimating it or literally rejecting it. Like, and I've seen this in so many of my readings where with this placement, high sex drive, right? You can have a high sex drive, but where you actually reject or push away purposely. Even if you find yourself in a situation with somebody who's like literally like, you know, giving themselves to you, you'd be like, you know, not so much, you know, and it can end up leaving. I'm just thinking about one of my clients who has this placement. Literally a woman was unclothed in bed, and he actually climbed out the bathroom window so not to be with her, and there was nothing wrong with her. He just wasn't feeling like that he was clicking with her, and he was like, what's wrong with me? Why do I do this? And I'm like, Black Moon and Cap, that's it, you know? You know, and look, if you know that about yourself, you know to look for other things, make sure other things are in place in relationship. And you could definitely, there could be forms of love with people who are much older than you with this placement, in which like it's a simple friendship, like a beautiful friendship prevails, but where you could find yourself deeply bonding with people who are much older than you, which is really quite beautiful placement, no? You know? So chances are you have felt ashamed or otherwise wrong for your desire to excel or succeed or reach for worldly goals and ambitions in a previous life that you brought into this life. And you're likely to feel very uncomfortable around people who seem materialistic, very status conscious, particularly business minded and practical or ambitious. You may be like on the other end of the spectrum, or at least it's the way you come off. I'm not even going to say only externally. This might be the narrative that you have said over and over to yourself over the trajectory of your life, where, oh, they're only, you know, I do what I do because I love it. They're all about money and possessions and really like poo-pooing it. But yet on this, you know, very deep level, you too want those things as well. But you can't reason them out in a healthy way within your mind, you know? So, yeah. So it can be very hard to connect with your own ambition and your need for others' esteem, but going there and really allowing yourself to feel these things is very life-changing. It really is. It's throwing some light onto it. If you feel, but on the other hand, if you feel very uncomfortable with these things, extremes can happen here, right? Where you go for the goal and all of that, but then you end up feeling really badly afterwards. So the path to empowerment is self-acceptance and moderation, right? Again, thinking all 10th house energy things here. So you really want to reflect on your feelings and your ability to love and understand others. And don't close yourself off. Learn to make concessions. Think about what your role is in society. And it's okay to want things, and it's okay to have those goals. It's all good. All right. Now let's go on to Black Moon in Aquarius. So your test has to do with personal freedom and the feeling of individuality and differentiation for others, right? Because Aquarius is all about doing things out of the box, ruled by Uranus. It's like future, you know, always thinking about the future and how things are unique and different. So if the Black Moon works well with you, you will be an independent, friendly person. Otherwise, you could demand freedom at all costs and be a rebel without a cause. Or you might be afraid to experience freedom even if you crave it, where it's almost debilitating. Sexuality manifests itself in permanent change and is in very varied ways with this placement. So people with Lilith and Aquarius look for new erotic sensations in which fantasy plays a very important role. There are periods in which the libido is remarkable and others where it's complete abstinence. You know, it's one extreme or the other. Then you remain in a state of incomprehensible chastity where it's like nothing's happening for you. You can appear tame, but when you come into contact with, you know, an individual, you're like almost like devouring of somebody, right? Where you abstain for a very long time, and then when you finally meet somebody, it's like you want to devour them, right? And it's like this where your instincts always sort of feel on edge when it comes to these emotions and these hidden things that are sort of like under the surface. You know, maybe you never had an idea, a really good idea of what a sexual relationship is, you know. I mean, a lot of people haven't, right? It's just a silly thing. And I always say, we learn history and math in school, right? But we don't learn these things that are so important as far as us being healthy individuals growing up, right? You know, so maybe you never had an idea of what a sexual relationship is, and then suddenly you marry and you go from being sexually ignorant to, you know, intense knowledge, in which case you become prey to like numerous temptations. It's like, okay, the cat is out of the bag, so to speak. Well, you know, the top is blown off the top of the cup, and all of a sudden you're realizing these things, and you can't, and it's like you just become very, very curious about doing different things. Now, in extreme cases, we could find true sex addicts here because they refuse to put a limit on their freedom, right? You fear nothing. Adventure is your reason for being, and you expect nothing from your partner. You find it hard to separate the good from the bad. You will always have doubts in the emotional and sexual sphere, which will lead you to disappointments. Sexual desire becomes a goal. You confuse friendship and sex. I mean, yeah, I've seen this so many times, like in play with a lot of my clients. Yeah, you get to experience disturbing sensations. These are not always satisfactory to you because you usually make bad choices in a partner. Something to keep in mind, you know, something to keep in mind. Or you can also find yourself not really making the best choices as far as like friends go, you know, or groups that you associate yourself with. Your sexual instinct is almost like an anarchist, right? And destroys all taboos. And you tend to experiment in all areas in a very varied and very bold way, then chances are you have felt ashamed or you know, made to feel like you were off for wanting to be part of a group, a team, or community, or for being one of the crowd. And this can make you very weary of people who seem to want these things, who seem to like really try so hard to be a part of the group or be a part of the crowd, right? That can actually make you feel uncomfortable because, right, it's we reject these harsh realities of ourselves that we identify in other people. So the answer is not to reject these basic needs, though, since this can result in like a binging and purging on a social level for you, going all out, then feeling bad about it and hiding away, and then going back out there, right? And it's like this kind of cycle. So self-acceptance can empower you to put an end to extreme behaviors in this area. You know, anything in this 11th house area, in addition to whatever house you natally have it in. So the advice here is it'll be beneficial for you to reflect on what freedom is to you. What does it mean to you? And at the same time, reflect on the idea of respecting others. You know, and think about how you respect others and reinforce your own personality and really to be yourself. To be yourself, and whatever that means, right? And finally, we have Black Moon Lilith in Pisces. So your test will be related to mysticism, right? Because Pisces is that 12th house energy. So mysticism, or the need to transcend material limits. Your spirituality or creative imagination can give very good economic returns. So yeah, I know somebody with this placement, and they're actually they do special effects for Broadway. You know, when Broadway used to be Broadway, if we ever have Broadway again. Yeah, so you need to have, you need to dive into the depths of knowledge, right? Really get into something. Think about Pisces is the oldest water energy. I always say, think about the 12th house. Pisces energy is like this bottomless. It really is like this bottomless ocean. So just think about like, so intuition and emotions and creativity and fantasy, but it's also escapism, right? So we have, it's like a mixed thing, right? Just the same way as the ocean is. But with this placement though, you could get good economic returns on tapping into any of these things. So, you know, being a light worker, being in the spiritual community, being in the creative community, anything like that. I think it's funny that he does special effects, because it's like, it's not really what you see, right? And isn't that Neptune? Neptune rules the 12th house, so I think it's perfect. However, there is a risk of falling into chaotic situations with this placement, or even feelings of self-pity, right? Because that is that 12th house with Pisces. You may have personal secrets or be a trusted holder of other people's secrets, for sure. Pisces usually relies on intuition and imagination, but this unlimited imagination leads to a disintegration of self, to self-destruction, right? So this situation makes a libido appear from the earliest youth and extends beyond its sensitive nature to make you cling too much to your partner. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of times these experiences, these early experiences, you know, come to us unsolicited. Like this person that I'm just telling you about now, he was taken advantage of. He's a male by a female babysitter when he was young. So, you know, a lot of times these things can happen just from and I'm not saying that's for all of you, obviously, with this placement, but I'm just giving you an example. And so there is this clinging to the partner, right? And you can become lovesick when you do not accept a breakup. You can even reach the point of blackmailing and threatening your partner, or just becoming a really, like, just not a dark person, right? Just a really dark person when things don't work out. So chances are you felt ashamed, right? Because whenever we have the Lilith energy, it's about working through the shame that we brought into this life. or felt like you were off or not right, or it was wrong, right? If you felt needy or compassionate for people, or wishy-washy, or you were made to feel bad about having a spiritual side, right? And so you could feel very uncomfortable or annoyed with people who resist labels, who are not very assertive or ready to take the lead, right? Rejecting or feeling ashamed of your basic needs in these areas can lead to extremes, right? In these areas, extreme behavior, and then the repetition of cycles, the binging and the purging with these traits, right? And the key to moderation and empowerment here is all about self-acceptance. It really is. So it's all those 12th house energies. So the advice here is really reflect on how to develop your spirituality and learn to combine your intuitive knowledge, right, which you have, and your ability to tie up loose ends. It's like shaking the dead wood off the tree. But all of these things need to be done with an open heart, right? Yeah. So that is the last of the Black Moon Lilith placements. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this helpful. Definitely let me know how you resonate with this. Leave your comments below. Take care now. Bye-bye.